And I think you can hear me. Is that correct? You can hear me? I can only see one of you at this point. And we will begin, as usual, with the Vajradhara, not the Vajradhara, we'll begin with the Going for Refuge and Bodhicitta. So please recite these prayers with faith and devotion. Oh, I need to get back to the beginning. O Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Barado Dane Chapsum Che Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sanam Ji Dola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Che Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sanam Ji Drola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Barado Dane Chasum Je Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sanam Ji Dola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Senjen tamje dewa dan dewe judan damrar juje donga dan donga ji judan dawa jurche donga mebe dewa tamba tam mindrawa jurche Nirin chata nidan dawe tanyon shambola nebran jurche. May all sentient beings be happy and of the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred to those near or far. In the Dharma expanse palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas. Of the three times he shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. The palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas. Now, please bless us that please bless in all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arises wisdom. Now think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do that, we ourselves need to achieve Buddhahood. And the way to do this is by meditation, but before we can really meditate properly, we need to have understanding of what we are doing. And so we need to listen. Once we have listened, then we need to really think it through and have certainty in it. That means we need to contemplate. And so we need to engage in all three. So we're beginning by listening, and the topic we are listening to is the Abhidharma. In particular, the treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu is explained by the 9th Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters of the treasury of Abhidharma, we are speaking about the 6th, the teaching on paths and individuals. So paths are the types of wisdom. Individuals here is referring to the types of individuals who have who are on the path. So what type of individual are you? Or like a stream enter, a non-returner, and so forth. And so this chapter has three sections. There is the explanation of the paths, the explanation of individuals, and the explanations, or a specific explanation of the paths. So we are in the first part, the explanation of the paths. And in this explanation of the paths, there are four topics: the link between chapters, the essence of the paths, the focus of the paths, and how the paths arise. So we discussed the first two yesterday, and we started the third, the focus of the paths. Now, when we're talking about the focus of the paths, what we mean is, what are the paths focusing on? In other words, the path is wisdom. What is wisdom looking at? What is it focusing on? It is focusing on the four truths or the two truths. And so here, this explanation of the focus of the paths has two parts. The explanation of the four truths, which we spoke about yesterday, and now today we have the explanation of the two truths. It's interesting, there are contrasts or differences between the different the different types of schools of Buddhism. And when we talk about Mahayana Buddhism, there's often a much greater emphasis on the two truths, the relative and ultimate, than on the four truths. Of course, the four truths are like the basis for all schools of Buddhism. It's really important to understand the Four Noble Truths, and particularly to understand the first Noble Truth, which is what we spoke about quite a bit yesterday. But they're also, the two truths are, in the Mahayana, are very important because they're trying to understand what is the actual nature of things. It's the same with the four truths. The four truths is a different way of looking at the actual nature of things, the nature of things being, of all defiled composites as being suffering, their origin coming out of craving, or the karma and the afflictions, the cessation of them, and how to manifest that cessation through the path. So that's one way of looking at the nature of things. And you can also look at things in terms of the two truths, the relative and the ultimate. So there are different presentations of the relative and ultimate. And so you may have heard presentations of the ultimate truth according to the Mahayana, or the middle way. We're talking about it as being emptiness, the lack of any characteristics, and so forth. But that is not the presentation of the ultimate truth that's given here. The presentation of the relative truth is similar to the Mahayana. It's a little different, but it's similar. But the ultimate truth, the presentation of the ultimate truth, is different. So here we are therefore on the section on the explaining the two truths, which in the book is on the bottom of page 435. So let me share that screen. There we go. And bring that over. Hang on, I'm just rearranging things on my screen so I can see everything all at the same time. Okay, so explaining the two truths, the text reads, if not engaged by mind when it's destroyed or mentally excluded, it's relative, like vases or water. Ultimate being is different. So we've got the two truths, the relative and the ultimate. And it first talks about the relative truth. So the relative truth says that if you destroy something, either by physically destroying it or by mentally dissecting it so that you can't find that thing, then it's relative. Like vases, which you can destroy. You can take a hammer and smash a vase. Or water, which we'll get to in a moment. Ultimate being is different. So something that has ultimate existence is different. If you do everything you can, you try to smash it, but it's still there. And you try to mentally dissect it and take away all the parts, but you can't. You've got to the lowest bit, the fundamental bit, and that's the ultimate existence. So these are the two truths, the ultimate and the relative. So that's the basic explanation of this, and I'll go into more detail as we go through the commentary, which begins, the sutras teach the four truths, but they also teach relative and ultimate truth. So this is another place where you have different categories. We spoke about this a little bit yesterday. You can have 4 truths or 2 truths. 4 truths are suffering and so forth. The 2 truths are the relative and ultimate. So what are those 2? If a thing is not engaged by mind when it is destroyed by a hammer or so forth. So for example, you're looking at a jug. You can see a jug. Then you take a hammer and you smash that jug. We're talking about a clay jug. This is, there's no plastic back in the 4th century India. You're smashing the jug and you've got these potsherds left. That's all you've got left. At that point, when you look, you're no longer seeing a jug. You're seeing potsherds, right? Potsherds are not a jug. They're the remains of the jug. So that's when it's destroying it. Or when it is mentally excluded through prajna. Full knowing here means prajna, the ability to it's like intelligence. It's mentally excluded through prajna. It exists relatively. So mentally excluded, so it's like jugs or vases and water. So I've already explained it with vases. I think that one's pretty easy to see. You can also use that with other things. There's the famous example of the chariot, which we can update and say the automobile. You take all the parts apart, and there are thousands of parts in an internal combustion automobile. If you take them all apart, you've destroyed the car. You no longer see a car, you just see a bunch of parts, right? When they're all together, then you see a car. This is actually something that's comprised of relative things. It's comprised of other relative things. When you take when you have a jug and you smash it with a hammer, and you've got all these potsherds left, then those potsherds are also still relative because you can smash them into smaller and smaller pieces, right? Until you get down to the finest atoms, right? Which of course we can't do with a hammer because the atoms are too small. So that's kind of dependent upon the relative. Now the other example is an example of water. So what does this mean? Well, as it's explained in the 2nd chapter, everything material is made up of at least 8 different substances. And so the water that we drink, is also made up of 8 substances. And so these 8 substances are earth, water, fire, and air. Now, these are the 4 elements. And you say, wait a minute, there's water among those 4 elements. But that water that is a subtle element is actually more like the quality of being liquid and wet. It's not what we see when we see water. That's different. So the element water is different than drinking water. Drinking water actually, so it's those 4 elements plus the 4 of the form, scent, taste, and touch. So drinking water has taste. It has touch. It has form. You can sort of see it, right? And it has feel. When you get wet, you can feel it. So it's got all those things. So there's different things. And so when you look at a glass of water, you can say, well, here's this water. Well, it's got a touch. And that touch is different than its taste. And that taste is different than its scent. You hope it doesn't have any scent if you're about to drink it. If it has a scent, don't drink. It's flavor, right? And its form. These are all different, right? So you can kind of dissect it into those things. And then if you're really looking finely, you can dissect it even also distinguish that there are the elements of earth, because there is a little bit of solidity to it. Not, it's very liquid, so it's not much solidity, but it has a temperature, so there's fire. If it's cold, then there's only a little fire. If it's hot, then there's a lot of fire. It's liquid because it's got water. Because it's liquid, it has the element of water. And then what's the other one? Earth, water, fire, and air. It moves, so it's got air, right? So it's got all of these together. So you can take that water and kind of dissect it down and say it has all of these different qualities. And it's only when you put those qualities together that you get water. So that's something where when you dissect it, you get it down into the basic. It's based on the ultimate, which is the things that you can't destroy. So that's relative. You can either destroy it physically, or you can destroy it through analysis. You can also do the same analysis with cognition. You've got your cognition looking at something, and you can note that you have just the mere subjective awareness, the consciousness that knows its essence. You just sort of see it. And then you also have all the other things that kind of pick out its features. These are the mental factors. You might have a feeling, a sensation of some sort. You might have some sort of idea about it or whatever. So that actually your consciousness also, you can look and see that, well, there are all these different qualities that come together that actually make up my mind. Therefore, these minds, the whole thing of mind is actually what we experience as mind is actually relative. But it's made up of ultimate things because each individual sensation is, you can perceive it. You can discern them and see them, and so that is so the whole thing together, that whole complex, is your mind. The individual elements are like the ultimate. So these are true merely in conventional terms. And so when we talk about it being true merely in conventional terms, what this means is that everyone agrees when you've got a cup of water, you can say, this is water. And any English speaker is going to understand, yeah, and is going to agree, this is water. Well, maybe they'll disagree. Maybe they're just, what do we say? Maybe they're going to be, maybe they're going to just want to get in an argument and say it's not water, but everyone will agree. But generally people agree it's water. If you've got a jug or a vase, you say this is a jug or a vase, people are going to say, yeah, this is a jug, or this is a vase, this is a car. And so it's that way. We have all the words that we use in every different language, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it a car, a voiture, machina, you can call it a, gari, whatever you want to call it. But the people who speak that language, they're all going to understand what you're talking about, right? So they're truly merely in terms of words. Now the word, actually, this is kind of, I know that there are some people who are watching who are interested in translation, and other people are just interested in words anyways. The word for relative in Sanskrit is samvritisat, so the relative truth, samvritisat. And in Tibetan, it's kunzop dempa. And when you take a look at this word, actually, samvritisat is like the completely hidden truth, is sort of, or this complete, it's like fake. It's like, this is a word meaning fiction. It's not real. But it's true. It's kind of like, you can think about it when you read, and because one of the great things about teaching to Westerners is that you all read, or most Westerners read books. When you read a novel, I don't know, read one of the great novels like, on Dostoevsky or Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Faulkner or whoever you're going to read, you learn something, right? The author is trying to tell you something. Now, the characters and everything that they're using are made up, right? But you learn something. So it's true in that respect. Not saying that, oh yes, Anna Karenina really threw herself in front of a train. There was no Anna Karenina who threw herself in front of a train, but you learn something through it. So likewise, when we talk about the relative things of this world, yeah, they don't have an ultimate existence, but they're true in that we can all agree that vases are vases and water is water and so forth. And so this is true. And we can talk about karma, causes leading to results, an action leading to a rebirth and so forth, and say this is true on relative terms. And this is one of the main important points of Buddhist teachings. When you talk about the relative truth, you could say it as the fictional truth. That'd be like, in some ways, a more accurate translation, accurate to the words. But of course, no one would know what the heck you're talking about because everyone's used to saying relative. So we'll say relative because everyone uses relative, or most people use relative. So it's like it's the fictional truth. It's true to a certain extent in terms of how things appear in the world. So in this sense, it is true. And the Buddha taught relative truth as a way to guide sentient beings. So then we have the ultimate being, or ultimate existence, is different from such relative things that may be damaged. In other words, like when you have that jug or a vase that you have smashed with a hammer and you smash it into potsherds, then those can be smashed down to smaller things until you finally get down to the atoms of earth, water, fire, air, form, scent, taste, and touch, those 8 atoms. And once you get down to those 8 different types of elements, you can't smash it any further. You can't if you use your mind, you've got water and you try to look at it further and further, you can get down to say, well, actually, there are, there's just no further you can go than those little bit. You can take a look at a mood. You are in a good mood. And so then you take a look at your good mood and you see that, well, there are different qualities to it. There's just the basic awareness. There's a little bit of considering and analysis, and there's maybe a feeling of pleasure. There's maybe, if you're in a good mood, maybe there's some excitement and so forth. And you can break each of those down. When you get down to it, you can see that actually the feeling, the pleasurable feeling exists. You can feel it, so it must exist, according to the Great Exposition School. You've got the, you've got the quality of analysis. If you're good enough to analyze your mind and see all these different mental factors, then they actually kind of exist on the, ultimately. So this is the highest meaning. So this ultimate being existence is different from relative things that may be damaged. You cannot destroy them. Of course, they arise and perish on their own because they're impermanent. So it is dharmas such as form, subtle particles, instants, and non-composites. Well, of course, these are not, these don't arise and perish. Non-composites such as cessation or space that the mind can engage even when they're destroyed or when a dharma is excluded by mind. In other words, you can't dissect them any further. You can't smash them or dissect them any further. You get down to them, these basic building blocks. So you can think about it as just that, the basic building blocks of experience, which are the subtle particles, the instants of times, the consciousness, mental factors, and the three types of non-composites, the two cessations, and space. So that is the highest meaning of wisdom. As in other words, and here this is actually interesting, this is the highest object that you perceive with wisdom. This is a translation that is difficult to do. With the word here, meaning, the word in Tibetan is dön, and it's the Sanskrit would be artha, which means, is instead of meaning, not just meaning as we think about in English, it also means like the object of meditating, the entity that you're meditating upon. So when you have the highest wisdom and you look at the nature of phenomena, then what you see are these subtle particles, these moments of time, and so forth. So they are ultimate truth, according to the Great Exposition School. Okay, so you have to remember that we're talking about the level of Great Exposition School, and they hold that these subtle particles, the instants and so forth, have ultimate existence. When you're talking about the higher schools, the Sutra school basically accepts the same position. The mind only and the middle way schools have different positions. So just remember that different schools have different presentations of what the ultimate truth is. Here in this context of the foundation vehicle, it's this basic level saying there are these basic constituents of our experience that exist. So the respective characteristics of the two truths are those things that when destroyed or disintegrated, the mind that perceives them is not discarded or is discarded or is not discarded. So the relative truth is something that if something, when you can destroy it, or when you kind of examine it carefully with mind, then you no longer have a cognition of that thing, then that is relative truth. If you can't do that, if you try to destroy it physically, but you can't, if you try to break it down into smaller and smaller parts, but you can't, then that is ultimate. So here there is a paragraph that reads, and the explanation the explanation in the Tika. So the Tika is a Sanskrit word meaning a long, detailed commentary. And in particular, the one that Wangchuk Dorje means here is the one by Karmapa Mikya Dorje, which is about 2 or 3 times the length of Wangchuk Dorje's commentary. And so in Mikya Dorje's commentary, he says that they're permanent subtle particles of substance. Well, this is a problem. The subtle part, haven't we talked about in the first chapter how even subtle particles and even the subtle instants of mind are like impermanent, arising, abiding, and perishing all in the same instant, microscopic instant? So how do they permanent? Well, here Wangchuk Dorje is saying this means merely that they do not disintegrate through destruction by force. In other words, you can't destroy them by force. It seems not to mean permanent as in the context of permanent and impermanent, I would think. So this is Wangchuk Dorje trying to explain something that Mikya Dorje said. So basically here, when we talk about it, there are kind of three different levels of existence that we're talking about. We're talking about relative existence that you can destroy and kind of falls apart, ultimate existence that you can't. We've also been talking about substantial existence, which we've talked about before. So substantial existence here in Yashomitra's commentary says that substantial existence is something that exists by its own specific characteristics. So I think that this is actually more or less the same as the ultimate truth. Like, for example, the element of water has its own specific characteristics of being wet and liquid. And so that has that substantial existence. The mental factors have their own specific characteristics. For example, a mental factor of feeling has its specific characteristics of being pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, mentally pleasant, or mentally unpleasant. So those five, so you can kind of see this. So that's what we call the substantially existent. This is what we spoke about before, something that has specific characteristics. In other words, they're perceptible exactual things. They're perceptible things that you can see without thinking about them. You can just perceive them. So how the paths arise. So this is the fourth topic of the discussion of the paths. And so how the paths arise. In other words, path meaning wisdom. How do you develop that wisdom? This has two topics: an overview of how to enter the paths, and second is an explanation of how to meditate. So the first is the overview of how to enter the paths. This has 2 points, and here's the actual reads. With conduct, listening, and contemplation, completely trained in meditation. So here, this is actually one of Trungpa Rinpoche's. This is one of the 2 verses in this entire text that Trungpa Rinpoche quotes the most frequently. And this is a really important verse. So, and if you're going to train in meditation, what do you need to have in order to get to doing meditate? Can you just get in and sit down on a cushion and start meditating the way we try to do in most Dharma centers? It's not so easy. So you have to start out, you have to have your conduct, which means discipline. Conduct means discipline. You have to practice discipline. And in particular, discipline in the context here of the Abhidharma means like giving up misdeeds. Like saying, I'm no longer gonna kill. I'm no longer going to engage in sexual misconduct or stealing or so forth, giving those up, as we discussed last year in the discussion of the 4th chapter. So conduct is keeping discipline. And then the second is listening. So listening is what you're doing now. When you listen to something, then you develop understanding, right? So that understanding is important. With that understanding, is that understanding alone enough? It's not. You also have to kind of really have certainty in it. Certainty that's not sort of just accepting what other people say, or that can't be swayed by others. It's something that's really certain. So when you think about it, like we have the teaching about the 2 truths according to the Great Exposition School. You listen to it, and it makes sense. That's great. Is that certainty? Not yet. You have to really think about it. You have to think, what is this? What does this mean? What is the relative? How is it relative? And then you think about different things, like, is my hand, is that relative or is it ultimate? Then you realize, of course your hand is relative because you can tear it apart. It's got different parts, right? Or you can think about things like there's an example about water. Water is relative. How is that? So you've got to look at it and you've got to think about it. And this goes back to thinking about some of those things that are taught in the first 2 chapters, especially so you can take a look at those teachings and so forth. That's contemplation. So you need to contemplate it, really think about it for yourself until you're really certain and really convinced. And when you have that conviction, then you meditate on that conviction, completely trained in meditation. So you have to have these 4 things: first discipline, then listening, contemplation, and meditation. So that's generally how Rinpoche will talk about it. Although he'll use different examples than I used because I'm using the examples from the Abhidharma. He'll use different examples. Or sometimes he won't give examples. He'll just explain that basic meaning. So And one thing, this is reminding me, I had a few things I wanted to say at the beginning of the class that I just sort of launched in and didn't say the things I was going to say at the beginning. There was a question last night about, that came in by email about getting is it possible to get the Tibetan text? And this is something for last year's class, I produced a Tibetan text with the sort of bilingual PDF with Tibetan on one side and the English on the other. And this year, when I was getting ready for the class, I kind of forgot what I'd done last year and didn't do it. So I will try to do it in the next couple of days. I'm a little busy these days. I've got more projects now than I did last year. But I will try to do that, and I will let you know when that is ready for those of you who want the Tibetan text. And we will see what we can do to make that available. And then the second one is, I've mentioned a few times about the audio files of the first few chapters, and I know there's a lot of people who are interested in doing it. The difficulty is finding a way to put them up on a website where they're going to stay. I thought of putting them up on SoundCloud, but there's a limit to how much you can put up on SoundCloud unless you do this unless you pay them money. So am I going to be cheap or not? Or am I going to find some other account that has them or not? So I have to think about these things and see what I can do about that. And if possible, I will let you know when these are ready, but I'm thinking about how to do them. And then the other question that came in last night, this is a really bad time to do the questions, but it's something that I'm just thinking about them now. Someone asked about, can I say more about the infinite space meditation? And the meditation on infinite space is the first of the levels of the formless realm. It's discussed in the 8th chapter, so we'll go into it in detail then. Basically, once once you free yourself from desire, and then you go through the 4 levels of formless, then on the 4th level of formless, you realize that that's not the ultimate meditation. You want to go get into a finer level of meditation, so you engage in the preparations to achieve the formless, the first level of formless. And in those preparations, the basic way you do the preparations is by thinking that space is infinite. There's no end to space. Space is infinite. And you contemplate that. Now, there are more instructions, but as you contemplate that, then you achieve the first formless, the first level of formless meditation. That meditation, you don't necessarily, while you're in that meditation, meditate on space being infinite, but because you do that meditation in order to achieve it, it's called by that name. So that's the first. So basically, when we say infinite space, that means the first level of formless meditation. Okay, those will be discussed in the 8th chapter. And then the last thing I should have said at the beginning of the class is just to remind you, I have to do these while I'm remembering them. Otherwise, I'll forget again. On the 26th, the Saturday, the 26th, is the Gyalwang Karmapa's birthday, and we will be having a puja here at the monastery, so there'll be no class on the 26th. Okay, so now we will go back to the text. The overview of how to enter the paths, and there are the 2 points. The actual is first, and this is with conduct, listening, and contemplation, completely trained in meditation. So to explain Wangchuk Dorje's commentary here, those who wish to see the truth should first abide in the disciplined conduct of definite renunciation. Definite renunciation, actually, this is a horribly literal misunderstanding of the world. Actually, it means of a wish for liberation. You're practicing discipline with the wish to free yourself. So when you see the translation of renunciation in English, it sounds like you want to get away from the world. In a sense, it's that, but it's actually that you want to liberate yourself. The word in Tibetan and Sanskrit actually means to liberate or emancipate. So it's the wish for emancipation. So you're practicing the discipline with the wish to achieve liberation. Then you retain the meaning from listening that is compatible with seeing the truth. In other words, you are studying scriptures that are compatible with the wisdom you're going to develop. If you are studying scriptures that say there is a permanent soul, you can go to heaven, and when you get to heaven, there will be all sorts of virgins and whatever, those are not compatible with seeing the nature of selflessness. So those are not the scriptures you study. You study the scriptures that teach you what is going to be compatible with what you want to achieve, the nature of the 4 noble truths. So you study the scriptures that teach the nature of the 4 noble truths. And then by knowing the meaning they have listened to, you contemplate appropriately. So you know the meaning of the scriptures, and then you contemplate them and see, is this that? Is it really that? Then possessing both of these qualities, you have both the listening and the contemplation, then they should completely and unerringly train in the samadhi meditation on the meaning they have contemplated. So you have been listening to the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, and then also on the factors of enlightenment and so forth, doing the four foundations of mindfulness, and you study those, and then you practice samadhi meditation on that. So contemplation arises from listening, and meditation arises from contemplation. And actually, it all kind of arises from discipline in a sense, because if you are undisciplined, then you're just going to distract yourself. You're going to disturb your mind. And when you disturb your mind, then it's going to be harder to engage in listening, contemplation, and meditation. So that's that. Now, these three types, especially the listening, contemplation, and meditation, these also produce prajna. So the essence of the three full knowings are the three types of prajna that make you enter. That is really funny looking. The essence of the three full knowings make one enter. What does that mean? I think it's basically the type, what it means, what we're talking about is the three types of prajna this produces. So you've got the prajna of listening, etc., are subjects of name, both, and meaning. So prajna is a consciousness, and so a consciousness is a conscious subject of an object. So what is it conscious of? Well, when you have the prajna of listening, what it's thinking about is the words, the names. You're thinking about the words. When you have the prajna born of contemplation, you're thinking a bit about the names, you're thinking about the meaning, you're kind of thinking about both. The meaning here not being a conceptual meaning, but the actual, again, this is that word that's difficult to translate, the meaning and the entity, the meaning and the actual nature. You're thinking about those two together. And then the meditation is when you're actually on the meaning, not the meaning of the words, but the actual nature of the truths when you're meditating on those. So those are the three distinctions. So one is, according to the Great Exposition, or some members of the Great Exposition, the first is the listening, the prajna of listening is thinking about it completely in terms of words. The second is kind of words and the thing itself, the truths themselves, the nature itself mixed. And the third, meditation, is just knowing the nature, meditating on the nature of the truths. So the commentary reads, some members of the Great Exposition say that the natures of the three full knowings, or prajnas, born out of listening and etc., which means contemplation and meditation, are respectively conscious subjects that take the name only. So listening takes the name, you're thinking about words, or both the name and meaning, both the name and also the actual nature of the truth. And then the third, meditation, takes the meaning only, or only the actual nature of the truths as their object. This is like beginner, intermediate, and expert swimmers grabbing onto a float when learning how to swim. So a beginner swimmer, when this beginner is in the water, they've got these things on their arm and they've got a little bubble on their back so they don't sink. An intermediate swimmer has the bubble nearby, but they sometimes splash around for a few minutes before they then grab the bubble. And then the expert swimmers don't need the bubble at all. They just splash in and go swimming away, right? So that's like the difference according to some masters of the Great Exposition School. So here it says in the commentary, and this is also in the auto commentary, it says, it is heard. Yeah, right, he's saying, I'm skeptical. And the reason why he's skeptical is that then there's actually no contemplation. That's different from meditation. And because of listening is thinking about the words, and meditation is thinking about the meaning, and contemplation is thinking about the both. And then contemplation is kind of going back and forth between listening and meditating, but it's not actually any separate thing. So that's why it says it is heard. So the master says that if that is so, then there is no contemplation separate from listening or meditation. So therefore, he explains that the three are the prajnas, or full knowings, born respectively from credible scriptures. So you're studying, and when you're studying the credible or the authoritative scriptures, that brings the prajna of listening. When you're analyzing them with logic, that brings the prajna of contemplation. And when you are resting in samadhi and meditation, looking at them, that brings the prajna of meditation. So those are the three types of prajna according to according to Vasubandhu. So that's more his position. Now there actually are several other positions explained in Yashamitra and so forth, but this is, I think, the most important. And this last one, the Vasubandhu's position, I think is the one that, well, maybe I'm biased. This is the way that Trungpa Rinpoche describes it. And other masters describe it. So I think that this is actually the one that you should think about. So basically, prajna born of listening. You're studying, you're reading, you're listening. Reading is also considered listening, but we always use the word listening because that's what's the word that's traditionally used. Contemplation is analyzing. You got to really get in there and actually take the time to really look at it and really think about it. And then there is meditation, which is just looking and perceiving and resting in the nature. So next is, well, if you're going to develop that prajna born of meditation, well, how do we meditate? So we have the explanation of how to meditate, but when you think about the explanation of how to meditate, this is not giving you actual detailed meditation instructions. If you try to, there may be some of these meditations that you can kind of do from these instructions, but it's not very detailed. On the other hand, these are also often kind of like overviews and sources that masters will quote. So, explanation of how to meditate has two topics: the attributes of the support or the meditator, and then the stages of the path that one meditates on. So, who's going to meditate? Who's able to actually meditate? That's what we're saying, the attributes of the support, the meditator. So what kind of characteristics or what kind of qualities do you need in order to be able to actually meditate? I think we can all sort of understand this when you have Dharma centers in the West and other places. Some people come in and they can just sit and meditate. Some people have trouble. So how is it? What is it that you need to meditate? So this topic, the support of the meditator, has three topics. The support, that means the body or the type of meditator that will complete the path. The support that will not complete the path. And as an elaboration, an explanation of the noble families. So the support that will complete the path, in other words, the type of body and mind set that you need in order to complete the path, says those with two distances of basically solitude of body and solitude of mind is the way that it's often talked about. In the 8th chapter, in the commentaries on the 8th chapter of the Bodhisattva, it talks about the beginning part of that chapter, the beginning 80 stanzas of that chapter, so are talking about the solitude of body and solitude of mind. So here, that's the two types that you need. So how can meditation be completed? If you're going to meditate, what do you need? Those who first are with or possess the two distances from body's distractions and mental negative thoughts will entirely complete meditation. So when you start meditating, this is different than an experienced meditator. When you start meditating, you have to have distance from bodily distractions. You have to kind of separate yourself from all the worldly distractions. I mean, so this is what we do, we have special places, like a lot of people have their own shrine rooms or a little corner in their room or someplace where they sit and meditate. Even better is to go on retreat. If depending on your situation, of course, but it's good to go off on retreat and so forth, to get distance from your bodily distractions. Because if you are trying to meditate and your cell phone is right next to you, going beep, even if it's not going beep, if it's just sitting there saying, please pick me up, you're never going to be able to do it. When you're meditating, you've got to I have to put the cell phone far away. I have to put it in the drawer and turn it off and close the drawer. Otherwise, I just can't do it. So that's like one level, but it's even more than that, because if you have people running back and forth and so forth, you might say, oh, we should be able to meditate in the world, but not as a beginner. Meditating in the world is later, once you have some experience. First, you got to be able to rest. That's bodily, distance from bodily distractions. And the second is mental negative thoughts. This means, in particular, thoughts of desire. I want this, I want that. Or it's worry about the past and the future. These are like the obscurations of meditation that we talked about. You have to be able to separate yourself from those. So those are the two distances that you need. Distance from bodily distractions and distance from mental negative thoughts. So the support that will not complete the path, this has two topics. What is to be discarded and the antidote. So what do you discard? It's not the insatiable or dissatisfied. Let me see if I can get that all on one screen. Oh yeah, not the insatiable or dissatisfied. So you have if you are insatiable, in other words, if you just can't have, if you've got something but you want more, then then you won't be able to really meditate well. If you're dissatisfied, if you just haven't been, you aren't able to get anything and you're unhappy about it, you're going to have trouble meditating. So to crave for more is insatiable. To want what is not had is dissatisfied. Now the descriptions of these teachings primarily that the Buddha originally gave to his bhikshus. So they apply to bhikshus and bhikshunis, primarily the way they're taught, but they also apply to us lay people. So to read the commentary, those two distances are easy for those who have few desires and who are satisfied. In other words, if you are fine with whatever you get, you're going to have an easy time meditating. If you always think, oh, I need this, I need that, I need a thicker cushion, I need this, it's too sunny here, I need a sunshade, I need my special meditation straps, and I can order one online from this company and so forth. And there's so much junk you can get for your meditation because now meditation is a big business. So you can order all sorts of cushions of all sorts of size. I need that type of cushion. Ooh, my knee is a little bit too high. I need a support cushion. If you're like that, it's going to be hard to meditate. If you can just sort of sit, then it's easier to sit down and meditate. This is something that Drupal Rinpoche, Khenpo Hlabu often talks about. Not often. I've heard him teach about this several times. You just got to be able to, if you can just sit down and be happy no matter where you are. I mean, his point is you shouldn't even need a meditation cushion. You just should be able to sit down on the ground. So you kind of have to be a little tough to do this. I'm not as tough as him. I tried without a meditation cushion for a while. It just didn't work. I'm like a princess. I have to have everything just right. So that's why my meditation is terrible. So those are not easy. So it is not easy to meditate for the insatiable or the dissatisfied. Proponents of the Abhidharma say that when one has received an excellent Dharma robe and so forth, to crave for more is insatiable. So when you're a monk or a nun, someone gives you a Dharma robe. If it's a nice Dharma robe, fine. If it's a ratty old Dharma robe, fine. Who cares? But if you crave for more, it's like, this Dharma robe is okay, but this could have, maybe if we're slightly finer weave, if we're slightly better, then that's insatiable. And to want what is not had is to be dissatisfied. You didn't get a Dharma robe. You're wearing this ratty old threadbare robe from last year, and you want more, that's being dissatisfied. So the master explains that mental displeasure at getting only a few poor things is insatiability, and not getting many good things but wanting to is dissatisfaction. So I think that's pretty clear. Now this is, of course, the specific examples of our bhikshus and bhikshunis, but if your meditation cushion is just never good enough, then that's what we're talking about here. The opposite is the antidote. So the opposite of insatiability is what? It's contentedness. The opposite of dissatisfaction is what? It's having few desires. Satisfaction. Being content and satisfied. So these two, it's the opposite of insatiability and dissatisfaction, is their antidote. It's contentment and satisfaction, Wangkuk Dorje writes. These two, contentment and satisfaction, are in the three realms, or they are stainless, or four types. So you can have contentment in the desire realm, or in the form realm, or in the formless realm, or you can have undefiled. If you're like a noble being on the path of meditation, then you'd have undefiled contentment and satisfaction. They're both non-greed by nature. So then when we talk, then as an elaboration, there's a discussion of the noble families. So the noble families here, family is an interesting word, and I think this is a little bit of a mechanical translation on my part. It's kind of like the noble potentials. What is it that can produce a noble being? What do you need to have to become a noble being? The word family, gotra in Sanskrit, or jik in Tibetan, or sometimes it's kula in Sanskrit, they're kind of either word. It actually means caste. And so we can't translate it as caste in English. It's like your potential. So the potential, the noble potential. So there are four, the four noble families or noble potentials, and there are 2 points. There's non-greed, the noble family. So when you have, when you lack greed, so non-greed means having no greed. It's the absence of greed. And that is the noble family. Well, there are 2 types of, so among these types of greed, those that produce nobles are called the noble family, or the noble potential, the noble capacity. So if you have, so you can have different types of non-greed, but in particular, there are 4 that are taught, being content with dharma robe, alms, and a bed. And the fourth is taking joy at like the cessation of the afflictions and at the path of meditation. So those are the 4 noble families, or the 4 noble potentials. So of these, 3 are contentment by nature. So the contentment of being satisfaction, having a dharma robe, alms, and a bed are contentment by nature. And the fourth is, so the 3 teach conduct. So those 3 teach conduct. The last being taking joy at abandonment of afflictions and at the path is teaching the action. What do you need to do? You need to engage in the path to achieve the cessation of the afflictions. And they're taught as the antidotes for the arising of craving. So they, in order to quell the desire for things one grasps as mine or me, so your dharma robes and such are things that you grasp, a dharma robe and alms and a bed. Those are things that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis would grasp as their own. And then, or things that you grasp as me, your aggregates and so forth. And so this is either for a time, for a short time, if you're talking about the non-greed of just not wanting for a short time. If it's temporary, then it's for a time, or forever if you're actually eliminating the afflictions, then so it can be for either way, either for a temporary time to suppress them, suppress your greed and so forth, or to ultimately uproot it. So of these 4 noble natures, the first 3, which are satisfaction with having a dharma robe, satisfaction with having alms, and a bed. So being content with whatever you get. As Drupal Rinpoche often says, you just got to be content with what you have. If you're always worrying about more, it's going to be hard to meditate, and then it's hard to develop the noble path. The 4th noble family is joy for being without what has been abandoned. In other words, when you have eliminated the afflictions, you take joy in that sensation, and for meditating, so you enjoy meditating. So those are the 4 noble families. So this is also non-greed by nature because it is directed against existence and the desire for existence. Because what keeps you in existence is what? It's your attachment. So that's the primary affliction that we need to overcome according to the Great Exposition. So here, with a satisfaction with a dharma robe, alms, and a bed, this is, of course, directly speaking to bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, as well as, of course, to novices. But, for lay people, it's kind of similar. You're happy with the clothes you've got. You don't need to have, 3 closets full of clothes you never wear. You can have just happy with what you have and not think, if you're always thinking, I need to get this, I need to get that, then it's going to disturb your mind. If you're content with the food that you have, if you're content with a bed, if you're happy with whatever comes your way, then you're fine. Then you're going to be able to actually engage in practice. Okay, so the 4 noble natures explained by the Bhagwan teach both method and action to students who yearn for liberation. So if you have that wish to become liberated, what we usually translate as renunciation, you want that wish for liberation, Of them, the first three teach the conduct, and the last teaches the objects, actions. So the being content with your dharma robe, alms, and a mat is a conduct, what you do, and the last teaches the action, the meditation you do. As it says in a sutra, if you do this action by these methods, before long you will attain liberation. So if you follow these, if you have these four qualities, you're quickly going to be able to achieve realization and liberation. They are taught as an antidote for the arising of craving. So there are four cravings taught in the sutra. So this is a quote from a sutra. Bhikshus, if craving arises, it arises for a dharma robe, for alms, for a bed, and a seat. If it stays, it stays. If it is manifest attachment, it is attachment. Bhikshus, if craving arises, it arises thus for birth and for destruction. So when you're craving, what are you craving for? Well, if you're a bhikshu and bhikshuni, what you want is a nicer robe, more food. Your sponsors only gave you a potato yesterday. You'd like a little bit more than just a potato. There's a story of one of the yarnes, the summer retreats, the Vasa retreats, the summer rains retreats. One time, the Buddha and three other bhikshus were, I think Shariputra was one of them. And if Shariputra was there, and probably Madhgalyana was also there. I don't remember exactly who was with the Buddha. They were going back to a monastery, but they didn't get there in time. And they had to stop someplace on the way before they got to the monastery to do the rains retreat. So there are four of them, so they had enough people to do it. And they got there, and it was in the middle of a famine. The crops were bad, and there was just nothing to eat. And the place they got to, there was a farm, and they asked the farmer, "Can we do our rainy season retreat here?" He said, "Sure, you can do your rainy season retreat here, but I haven't got anything for you to eat. I mean, there's just no food. There's nothing to eat. All I have is this horse feed." I don't remember what it was. It was oats or chaff or something like that. It's just really, horses with big teeth can grind through it, but humans can't do it. And so they're sitting there. They've got plenty of horse feed to last them for 3 months and nothing else. And they're sitting there, and the other monks are thinking, "Oh, this food is terrible. Not only is this food terrible, but the Bhagavan Buddha is reduced to eating horse food. What is this?" The Buddha was just like there, quietly. So they had their meal. It's like, "Here, have some horse chaff." And they had their horse chaff. And it's like, and the three monks were eating, like, oh, this is terrible. The Buddha was just eating. He was fine. And they're saying, how can you actually enjoy this stuff? So then the Buddha took out a little bit of the horse food that he'd been chewing, because you have to chew this stuff for a long time. It's horse food. And he gave it to all the other monks. And they all took a little bite of what the Buddha had been chewing. And it was like the most delicious thing they had ever tasted, just because of the power of the Buddha. So being content, so that whatever it is that you have, you're content with it, then you're going to be able to meditate. Okay. Oh, let's see. Okay, we'll get back to the commentary. The first three are desire for things one grasps as me or as mine, such as dharma robes and so forth. And the fourth is is to desire or crave for the thing grasped as me, the body. The conduct quells craving for things grasped as mine for a time or temporarily. That is, when you're giving up if you're being content with your dharma robe and so forth. And the action, that is being content with cessation and the path and meditation, quells craving for the things grasped as mine and those grasped as me forever. So being content with outside things is temporary. It's not real, it's not permanent liberation, but the action leads to permanent liberation. So now we've come to the sections on the stages of the path one meditates on. So this has two topics. So the first is the methods for tranquility meditation, and the second is the methods for insight meditation. So the methods for tranquility meditation. So tranquility meditation, this is when I translated this, I was thinking we had to translate everything in English, but the word everyone uses is the word shamatha. So We're talking about shamatha meditation. The methods of shamatha meditation, this has two topics: the order in which to begin, and then the actual methods of samadhi meditation. So when you're going to begin meditation, tranquility or shamatha meditation, what do you need to do? The order in which to begin reads, one enters that through the repulsive and mindfulness of in and out breath for those with excess desire or thoughts. So you can do either the repulsiveness meditation, which is meditating upon the nature of the body as being made up of all sorts of foul substances that is going to rot and dissolve like any corpse would do. Or the mindfulness of in and out breath, so that's basically mindfulness of breathing. So those people who have excessive desire should meditate upon the repulsive meditation. Those who have too many thoughts meditate on the breath. So how should someone who is thus a suitable vessel enter meditation? In other words, someone who is that content and satisfaction, who is able to settle their mind and is not always distracted by thoughts of external things. One first enters that by the meditation on the repulsiveness and the meditation on the mindfulness of the in-breath and the out-breath, as these will tame the mind. So whose mind are these going to particularly tame? So this is for those with greatly excessive desire. Those people meditate on the repulsiveness meditation, or excessive thoughts. That the antidote for excessive thoughts is meditating on the breath. This is something that the Buddha taught in a sutra. He taught about specific qualities you meditate on in order to overcome specific afflictions. So if you have excessive desire, the Buddha taught meditate on repulsiveness. If you have excessive thought, meditate on the breath or the wind. And if you have excessive anger, you meditate on loving kindness. If you have excessive envy, you meditate upon the sympathetic joy, enjoying, rejoicing in others' good fortune, and so forth. So the actual methods of samadhi meditation, then, this has two topics. Then there's the methods for meditation focused on the repulsive, and then there's the meditation for those focused on the breath. It's the methods for meditation focused on the repulsive. This has three topics: the overview, explanation, and particular attributes. So the overview here says the skeleton for all desires. So if you have excessive desire, then you should meditate upon the repulsive meditation. In particular, meditating how everything is based, how beings are all particularly what do we say? Skeletons. This is the one that is mentioned here. There are actually several different types of repulsiveness meditation. If you actually want to meditate on this, it's best to get the instruction for someone who does it. We don't tend to do that so much in the Tibetan tradition. It is something that's still practiced in the Theravada tradition. It's a very, very effective, I think, and a very powerful meditation from the reports of people who actually have done it. And you can kind of contemplate a little bit, but thinking about a little bit is helpful. It doesn't get you to the real point of the meditation, though. So there are four types of desire, and we're talking primarily about the sexual desire here: greed for color, greed for shape, for touch, and greed for, here I translated as respect, but actually this is kind of like service. You want someone to kind of massage you or to, help you out, to just make you feel better. Your shoulders are tense. You want someone to give you a little rub and things like that. If you're really desirous of that type of service, or people rubbing oil on your legs or whatever, feeding you and, helping you out, that's the type of thing, the service. So the antidote for the first, the greed for the color, you're thinking about that beautiful person's fine complexion, whatever you think a fine complexion is. So you meditate upon the bluishness or the foulness or redness of a corpse. So, and at the time of the Buddha, it was very common for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to go to charnel grounds, because at that time in India, what they did is they'd wrap a corpse in a shroud and they put it in the charnel ground, where it would then rot and animals would eat it, the scavengers would eat it. And so then you'd meditate upon the blue, and you watch that decompose and so forth, and it goes through different stages, which are described at great length in other texts. And so it goes stage of bluishness, foulness, and redness, and so forth. Then the antidote for the secondary is a shape. That beautiful person has just like their body is just like their physique is just perfect, you think. It's like that shape. the waist, the shoulders, the hips, whatever it is. You think it's perfect, right? So the antidote for that is to think about the body being torn, wasting and being torn apart. The antidote for the third is to, which is the touch. You know, if you like the feeling, like, you know, oh, how does it feel to touch their skin or whatever? The antidote for that is to meditate on it being eaten by bugs or other animals, and then down to the point where it's like all the meat is gone. You've just got these bones that are held together by sinews, the bones being just barely held together. The antidote for the fourth, which is the wish for service, someone who's going to, you know, treat you nicely, is to meditate on an unmoving corpse. So meditating on the skeleton that is on the repulsiveness is the antidote for all the desires, for every type of greed, all the different types of desires people, because it does not allow for any of the four types of greed or lust, you could say, right? So here, just to kind of, there are two ways to do the repulsiveness meditation. You can meditate on yourself, on your own body being repulsive. As you meditate on your own body being repulsive, and we have a lot of attachment to our own bodies, frankly. So as you meditate upon that, it reduces your own attachment to your own body, but it also, and helps you see the nature of your own body. But also when you realize that your own body is just a pile of flesh and bones and disgusting substances like bile and so forth, then you'll have less interest in doing things that kind of bring pleasure. Why should you try to please something that is what is often described in the sutras and other texts as just a sack of filth? It's like your skin is like the outside of a sack, right? And inside, what is it? There's blood and guts and gore and phlegm and bile. And, you know, unless you have gotten used to it, if you're like a surgeon who's used to doing operations, it's one thing. But for most of us, if you remove the skin and look inside, it's just pretty disgusting, right? It's unclean. And so it's a sack of filth. So that's looking at it from your own body. And this is an important type of meditation. In the 8th chapter, The Way of the Bodhisattva, this is the first. It talks about the repulsivist meditation twice. The first is talking about meditating upon your own body. And then the second is thinking about the person that you feel attracted to. Now, the scriptures are, you know, when the Buddha taught this, the Buddha was first teaching these meditations to monks. And the monks were mostly heterosexual. And so he was speaking primarily about who are they primarily attracted to? Well, they're primarily attracted to women. So many of the teachings are looking at women in this way. But if you are a woman and you are attracted to a man, if you are a man and you're attracted to a man, if you're something else and you're attracted to something else, whatever you are, whoever you're attracted for, the gender is absolutely no different. Lust is the same, no matter whom you're feeling it for. The object of the lust may change, but the lust, that character of wanting someone else, seeing another being as a source of pleasure, is the same in being an affliction, no matter whom you feel it for, no matter what support you are, whether male, female, or other. It doesn't matter. It's the same. The actual meditation, even if described in the texts, often as a bhikshu or a monk looking at a woman, that you shouldn't let that deceive you into thinking that this is somehow dependent upon gender. It's not. Because I think if you were to dissect a male body and dissect a female body, or dissect what do we say, a non-gender binary body, whatever sort of body you're going to dissect, no matter what the gender, you're going to find that they're all the same in being filled with blood and shit and piss and gore and all sorts of other stuff. There's no difference. So the question is, who are you attached to? Who do you feel lust for? That's the person you should meditate upon. And it's, why are you doing that? Now, when you do that, are you objectifying the other person? No, because the body is not the person, right? The other thing is that actually by going through the process of this, as you look through and you see, because when we look at another person that we see beautiful, that's beautiful, then, excuse me, when you looking at someone and seeing them as beautiful. You're seeing them as according to some characteristics. Now, it doesn't matter whether that person is male, female, or otherwise. It's the same, and whether you're talking about someone male, female, or otherwise, you're looking at that person being someone who can give you pleasure for some reason, something that you're desirous of. Your gender, their gender is not different. This point is that you're looking at someone else as someone who can give you pleasure, and as a result, you are not seeing that other person for who they are. Right? You're seeing them as an object of lust. It doesn't matter what your gender is or the other person's gender is. So, at that time that you're looking at that other person as an object that can give you pleasure, you're not seeing them. As you go through this process of then realizing, well, heck, any temporary pleasure I get is just not worth it. And besides, if you really think about it, the body is just a sack of filth. And you really come to understand this, then it doesn't matter, whatever the gender is, then you're not going to see that other person with desire. When you're no longer, or not see that other person with lust in particular, when you're not looking at that other person with lust, then you have the opportunity to actually see them. Then you're going to be able to develop compassion for them. If you are looking at someone and you are saying, oh, what a hunk, what a beautiful woman, what a beautiful whatever, you are not seeing that person. You can't really have compassion for them. So we have to get past those habits. Now, of course, we all naturally have, or by habituation from beginningless time, we experience lust for some sorts of people. This is part of being human. So the question is that we have to kind of decrease that lust. We have to suppress that lust or decrease that lust to the point where it's no longer going to prevent us from seeing people as worthy of our compassion and so forth, instead of seeing them as someone who can fulfill some need of ours. So that is why we meditate upon repulsiveness meditation. So the meditation, the explanation has 3 points, and the first is the meditation for beginners. And I'm going to go through this quickly because, first of all, it's relatively simple. Second of all, if you actually want to meditate on it, you have to go get the instructions from someone who really can give you instructions. And I think that'll be enough. So the explanation has 3 points. The method for beginners. At first, imagine bones that spread as far as to the sea, then narrow down. So first, you imagine yourself, and you imagine that you're all a skeleton. You just imagine that you think. So this is taking an imagination. It's definitely imagination. It's not looking and seeing things as they actually are. It's viewing yourself as a skeleton. And then you can then you imagine that more and more are skeletons until finally you can actually visualize everything out to the ocean, to the coast, to the sea. The whole land is covered with skeletons. And then you can, once you get to that point, when you're viewing that, then you narrow it down until you can come back to viewing yourself. So you kind of go out, visualize yourself as a skeleton, then go out to all beings on land, and then back in, narrowing it down. So at first, the beginner yogi who is meditating on repulsiveness at first turns their attention to their forehead or any other suitable part of the body and imagines that their flesh gradually rots and falls off, visualizing their body as a skeleton, right? So beginner yogi, male or female, yogi is kind of according to the dictionaries, it's a gender-neutral word. So I usually consider it gender-neutral. I know a lot of women who call themselves yogis or talk about becoming yogis in the yoga tradition. So they then imagine their bones that spread and fill everything as far as the sea, and then narrow the visualization down to only their own body. This is the yoga for the beginner. This is the training for the beginner. Then the method for the trained. So people, once you can do that, then the trained discard bones from the foot to half of the skull. So you're seeing your body as a skeleton, and then you kind of bring your attention further and further, and you kind of sort of discard the bones until you get to just half of your skull. In order to enhance this gathering of the mind, then the completely trained yogi discards bones from the body, starting with the foot, and directs their attention on the remainder. Then one discards or casts away all the bones up to half the skull and focuses the attention on half the skull. So basically you're just discarding, you're not thinking about them, and you just bring your attention down to just half the school, right half, left half, front half. It doesn't say in this. I imagine this is one where you'd have to get more instruction on the meditation to actually do it, of course. And then the method to perfect the attention. So once you got to the point where you can visualize half of the skull, or you can imagine half of the skull, a perfect attention is holding the mind between the eyebrows. Then you discard even that half of the skull until you have a little bone right in between your eyebrows, right in there. So when honing in the meditation, yogis who have perfected attention on the repulsive discard half the skull as well and hold the mind on a bone that is just the size of a thumb between the eyebrows. It is here. So you just sort of bring it further and further down. You can concentrate on that. So that's the meditation, and this is a very rough description of it. It's not enough to actually do it. That's partially intentional. But what are the natures of this? Because we're talking about the Abhidharma. So in the Abhidharma, you have to go through all of the different aspects of nature. So the repulsive is non-greed. It's on 10 levels, focusing on the appearance of desire by humans. So the nature of the repulsiveness meditation is non-greed. So it's lack of greed or a lack of lust. It's on 10 levels. So the 9 of the 4 dhyanas and their 4 preparations in special dhyana, plus the levels of desire. So you've got the 4 actual dhyanas, the first, second, and third, fourth dhyana. Then you've got the 4 preparations for the dhyanas. So those are the meditations that lead to each of those. You can do the repulsiveness meditation on any of those. And you can also do it on a special dhyana, which is like a special type of the first. It's kind of in between the first and second dhyanas. Plus, it's on the level of desire. So that means, and you're on the level of desire. In desire, there's no equipoise. So when you're doing it in desire, we're not really able to let our minds just rest evenly because we're still in the desire realm. We haven't perfected meditation. But it's similar. So for us ordinary people who are starting, we do this meditation, and it's kind of similar. We can concentrate for some short period of time, maybe 5 seconds, maybe a minute, right? Or maybe 10 minutes. But still, it's not like being able to rest at will in meditation. But it's similar to those. So its focus is on the appearances of desire, which are color and shape. So you're thinking about color and shape, the body and the desire realm in particular. And so because it focuses on color and shape, it is proven that it does not focus on names. It focuses on the meaning, on the actual physical support. So it focuses on the actual body. So you're actually thinking about the body, not on the words for the body. So it's support. That means the type of being that can produce this meditation. If it is not even among other wanderers, what need is there to mention other realms? So gods can't do it. Hell beings and the animals can't do it. Only humans. It is only produced by humans. However, it is not in the northern unpleasant sound because there is no path to detachment there. The northern continent of unpleasant sound is even more pleasant than a developed society, the technological society. It's just too pleasant and it's too nice. Sometimes I think that maybe our technological societies, our developed societies are getting close to that point, but we're not quite there. So we can still do this meditation. Okay, so what do we say? I'd want it to get a little bit further. But looking at the time and looking at the topics, I think it's probably better to stop here. Okay, so if there are any questions on the Zoom audience, or all those of you who are watching on YouTube, of course, please feel free to send in your questions via email. That looks like maybe no live questions today. So we will now recite the dedication prayers. Osanam de tamje sepani tobnenye peranam pamchete Kyega chi ba long cho bai si be co le ro ge nyo ro sho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. May bodhicitta, great and precious, arise in those who have not roused it, never weakening in those who have. May it grow ever stronger and stronger. Okay, so thank you very much. Just a reminder, we will have class tomorrow and the next day on the 24th and 25th, the 26th, the day off, and then we'll have class again on the 27th. Thank you.